We're here to idea everyone, to fire up your curiosity and connect you with the people and ideas that shape our world. Watch, listen, understand, connect, create. Let's move the human story forward together.
Hello and welcome to The Poetry of Science, a podcast which provides insight into new scientific research via the medium of poetry. I'm your host, Dr. Sam Illingworth, and each week I'll be introducing you to some of the latest scientific findings and sharing a selection of science-themed poetry. After all, we could all do with a little bit more poetry in our lives. In this episode I'll be exploring new research which has found that junk food advertising restrictions on Transport for London networks have prevented almost 100,000 obesity cases since 2019. Hordes of busy lives descend into the depths, waiting in line to cruise mechanical capillaries to work, to home, to visit the Queen. Shapes of colour catch the eye, rising from seas of unknown faces to leap into the consciousness of dulled and weary minds. Mouth-watering commercials that play on repeat, guiding unsuspecting wallets to regurgitate their contents upon the altars of convenience. A smorgasbord of future health emergencies, dripping in the consumption of our present excess. Wiped clean of cuisine, hungry billboards now ripple in the breeze, pushing their goods to sated, unsuspecting fares. This poem is inspired by recent research published in the International Journal of Behavioural Nutrition and Physical Activity, which has found that restrictions on the advertisement of high-fat, salt and sugar products across the Transport for London network has resulted in positive health and economic impacts. In 2019, 64% of adults in England were overweight, with 28% being obese and 3% morbidly obese. Obesity is a significant health risk and is associated with an increased risk of diseases including diabetes, heart disease, and some cancers. Many different public health interventions have been proposed to deal with rising obesity rates and their consequences, including targeted weight loss interventions, taxation, and labelling. Studies have also shown that restricting advertising for high-fat, sugar and salt, or HFSS products, can be effective, especially with regards to reducing levels of childhood obesity. As such, in 2019, Transport for London implemented restrictions on the advertisements of HFSS food across its transport network. In this new study, researchers have assessed the impact that these restrictions have had by observing what consumers were purchasing in their weekly food shops via surveys and comparing trends in London to a control group of households outside of London, where there were no restrictions on advertising in place. The researchers were able to assess the effect that this policy is having on people's health and the health service. The results show that the restrictions have directly led to almost 100,000 fewer cases of obesity than expected, around a 5% decrease, approximately 3,000 fewer cases of diabetes, and 2,000 fewer cases of cardiovascular disease. This analysis also found that the current restrictions would save the NHS more than £200 million over the lifetime of the current population. The study concludes that restricting the advertisement of HFSS products on the public transport network in London is likely to have led to considerable health and economic gains, whilst also reducing health inequalities. Whilst further research is now needed to investigate the impact of similar policies in other regions, it is likely that restricting the advertisement of HFSS products presents an extremely effective way of tackling rising levels of obesity at a national and even global level. Now that you've heard the science, let me read the poem to you again. Hordes of busy lives descend into the depths, waiting in line to cruise mechanical capillaries, to work, to home, to visit the Queen. Shapes of colour catch the eye, rising from seas of unknown faces to leap into the consciousness of dulled and weary minds. Mouth-watering commercials that play on repeat, guiding unsuspecting wallets to regurgitate their contents upon the altars of convenience. A smorgasbord of future health emergencies, dripping in the consumption of our present excess. Wiped clean of cuisine, hungry billboards now ripple in the breeze, pushing their goods to sated, unsuspecting fares. In this section of the podcast, I'd like to share a poem written by another poet on a topic related to the science that has been discussed so far. In this episode, I'll be reading The Sugar Thief by Ned Balbo. Ned Balbo is an American poet, translator and essayist who was born in Mineola, New York in 1959. Balbo earned a BA from Vassar College in 1981, an MA from Johns Hopkins in 1986, and an MFA from the Iowa Writers' Workshop in 1989. He has published 6 books of poetry, including Galileo's Banquet, published in 1998, Lives of the Sleepers, published in 2005, and 3 Nights of the Pearsides, published in 2019. Balbo's various awards include a National Endowment for the Arts, Literature and Translation Fellowship, the Richard Wilbur Award, the Poets' Prize, and the Robert Frost Foundation Poetry Award. The Sugar Thief by Ned Balbo. If it was free, you taught, I ought to grab it as you did. McDonald's napkins, pens, and from the school where you were once employed as one of 2 night shift custodians, the metal imitation wood wastebasket still under my desk. But it was sugar that you took most often, as, annoyed on leaving Dunkin' Donuts, Pancake House, and countless diners, I felt implicated in your pleasure, crime, and poverty. I have them still, your Ziploc bags of plunder. Yet I find today among the loose change in my pockets, packets crushed or faded, more proof of your lasting legacy. Thank you for listening to the Poetry of Science.
Thank you very much for being with us for this episode of the ideaXme Show. ideaXme is a global platform. Our mission is to move the human story forward by sharing knowledge of the future. You can find us on all major audio networks at www.radioideaXme.com, on YouTube and Vimeo. Please subscribe.